All right, we've had a lot of questions sent our way about injuries, injury updates, depth charts, status of different guys for this weekend's game against Boston College. And we're going to try and share some of that as much as we can. Florida State has a rule against sharing on injuries. If you're there at practice, if you're seeing things, they don't necessarily have a rule on it. If you're picking it up from inside the program, inside sources, different people that we've chatted with to kind of come up with some info that we'll give you today. I will say this, I would never share anything that I think would be super detrimental to this program. At the end of the day, I am a fan. And so trying to balance giving you guys information that you're asking about that I think is relevant, as well as trying to respect what the program has asked of media, though I'm not media at practice, is always a delicate line. We're able to push that boundary just a little bit, and until we get in trouble for it, we'll continue to try and bring you guys the up-to-date info that we have. What we'd ask in return, if you find value in these updates, if you find value in this video, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Help us bump those numbers up. Help us to continue to grow. Just went over that 10,000 number, which was really cool. But if you don't find value in it, then stay unsubscribed. No sweat, no big deal. So let's roll through them. Let's look at some of the guys that we are going to talk about. All right, Akeem Dent is a pretty obvious one. He was obviously injured in the game against Southern Miss, went out, was seen in street clothes, didn't play the rest of the game. You had some of the young guys come in, did a good job. There was a lot made about safety depth and what that would look like for Florida State this year. Certainly a concern. Walked into practice. He was photographed walking into practice today. But though he had football pants on and he had his helmet and shoulder pads in his hand, he didn't have any leg pants on. And you could also see that the back of his leg was taped up. That was a picture that I saw Brendan Sonnone of Noles 247 put out. I believe that Dent will be held out this week. I expect him to be very, very limited. I do believe he has a lower leg injury, but I don't expect him to play. And I think that this is probably going to go for several of the guys we talk about. I just don't know how much you need him this week. I have been told that if this were Clemson, the timeline may rapidly change, but Florida State does have the luxury of going into a road game this weekend where they are a 3+ touchdown favorite. I don't know that they feel the need to rush anyone back or trying to expound upon any timelines with the situations that they have at the injuries that we'll talk about. I think that obviously Dent has a lower leg injury. A lot of people thinking hamstring. I don't have specifics on, a timeline or anything like that. I would expect him to be held out this week. I would expect him to be back, maybe somewhat limited, but I would expect him to be back next week for Clemson, as long as there are no major setbacks. Another big one that a lot of people have asked about is Robert Scott. Robert Scott came into the year wearing a boot for much of fall camp. He rolled by our tailgate there for the spring game and had a boot on there as well. He got himself a plate of Guthrie's chicken. I've talked about this a couple of times. He was obviously seen after the LSU game, didn't finish out that game, but he was wearing a boot afterward. A lot that's been well reported. That's been something that's been out there. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. But again, I think it's a situation where that is going to be kind of nagging at Robert all year. If this were Clemson week, could he be back? Is it possible? I think so. I just don't understand why you would rush him back. And I don't think Florida State will. I think that Robert Scott will likely be held out of a lot for this week unless he's able to be 100% and have no chance of re-nagging at that, re-injuring that leg, that foot. I would keep him out. There's no chance that I would have him out at practice. I'd let him rest, let him recover, and be fully healthy going forward for Clemson. The same applies to the other offensive lineman that's being held out right now, and that's Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith came into the season with something that was kind of nagging, call it an upper body injury. I have been told about what it is. I won't disclose exactly what's kind of going on there, but I believe that something had been nagging at him. You could kind of see him in some discomfort against LSU. I think that's something that continued to go on through that game, and I just think Florida State knows that they had an opportunity with both Southern Miss and Boston College. We're going to be massive favorites, and you can get some guys some rest to where they can let Smith sit out this week. There's no reason to rush him back. I'm not saying he couldn't play, not saying he couldn't be out there, but to me, I think you let him rest up. I also think that you let Washington get as many snaps there at center as you possibly can in games where you can get by without Smith out there. I think it's a huge advantage to have that backup, have lots and lots of work in case Smith's injury, in case Scott's injury, whomever's. I think it serves a dual purpose. It lets those three guys that we just mentioned, Dent, Scott, and Smith, fully heal up for your biggest remaining game of the year. And you can disagree or agree with me and try and point out Duke or Miami or Pittsburgh. It doesn't matter. It's on the road at Clemson. You've got to get those guys healthy, but you also get their backup some quality reps. Now, guys are being forced into those positions. You certainly would have liked to work them in, but if you got to rely on young guys back in the back end of the defense or on the offensive line coming up after this first couple of weeks, I think you'll be in a really good position to do that. And so I would not have Smith out there in any situation. I would have I'd have Washington play in the center this week. And I think that's what will happen. I think you'll see Washington out there again. I'd expect all three of these guys back. Unless there's a setback, I expect all three of them back for the Clemson game in 10, 11 days now at this point. Okay, here's a big one that has been mentioned a little bit. Big shout out to Charles Mays over at Tomahawk Nation for this picture that we are using. But Ja'Kai Douglas is somebody that continues to get asked about. Obviously, he was shown in a sling on the sideline during that Southern Miss game. I don't necessarily expect him back before the bye week. I've talked with a couple of people. Fortunately, it's not super like season ending or anything like that, but I just don't anticipate that he would be able to get back or he would be able to make enough of a recovery to get back, for this weekend, certainly for Clemson the weekend after that. I think that you'd really be targeting that first game after the bye week. Fortunately, the bye week comes at a good time and get some of these guys out there, have them play a really tough physical game, and then you get the bye week going into the easier stretch of the season there in October. I think Ja'Kai is somebody who could certainly add another element to this pretty potent offense that Florida State already has. I just don't necessarily see it happening this week or next week. I'd love to be wrong there, but based on the folks that I'm talking with, I think it's a week or two away. That probably leads you right into the bye week. There are some questions around Brock Glenn. I want to get to that in just a moment, but first I do want to give some love to my guy over at Knapp Accident Injury. That's Alex Knapp. He is a die-hard Seminole. He graduated from FSU's law school. He owns Knapp Accident Injury. We've told you this before, but it is a law firm specializing in both car accidents, Uber and Lyft accidents, trucking accidents, personal injury, and more. You may not need him today, but listen, take down his number anyway. Lock it into your phone. You can do FSU Alex Attorney, however you will remember it. But Alex's number is 813-568-3724. He supports our show. He supports our Seminoles. He was out there at the tailgate with us in Orlando. If you have questions, if you've been hurt, if you have somebody that you love that's been in an accident, he will get his personal cell phone. You won't have to speak with some case manager or paralegal. Lock his number in your phone. And if somebody in your friends or family group needs him in the future, make sure you hit him up. Again, supports this show, supports the Seminoles. Let's take care of each other, Noles, and make sure that you're using Alex for any of your attorney needs in an injury or accident type case. Okay, back to Brock Glenn. You guys may have noticed that he went out of the game. Looks like he may have hurt his hand. Been some reports around maybe his thumb. Not 100% sure what the injury is, how severe the injury is. I know that there's always the concern of potential breaks in there. And this is one that probably isn't super detrimental to the team at this moment, but it is one that's frustrating. It is one that you certainly, when he made that run on Saturday, everybody was super jacked up, and you love to see his athleticism. You'd really like to see him out there, especially because of the fact that he could have a chance to get in this Boston College game if things get out of hand, which a lot of people anticipate they will. So frustrating for him. I don't know how big of a deal it is long-term. I still think he's QB3. I still think Tate is your backup at this point. But you're missing some practice time. You're missing some reps. And you really want Brock firing at 100% to be going to that quarterback battle next year. So hopefully if it's some kind of a minor break or fracture, it can, honestly, that could be anything from a couple weeks to, a broken hand can be anywhere from 1 to 2 months, right? 1 to 2 months from now pretty much takes you toward the end of the season. I'd anticipate Brock being back, even if it was toward the end of the year, whether that's bowl practice, playoff practice, whatever ends up being. Again, not sure how much this really kills you from a team perspective just because of where he is on the depth chart, but it is frustrating. You hate to see injuries when they are in garbage time like that. The last one that we've been asked about a couple of times, so we'll talk about it, is Kentron Poitier. Not necessarily somebody that I would expect back this week or next week. Again, that might be kind of the Ja'Kai Douglas timeline. Maybe for Clemson, you could see Kentron out there, but I think it's more than likely after that. Mike Norvell in his press conference today was not super optimistic. He said, you're hoping you can get him back in the next couple of weeks, hoping you can get him back soon. It doesn't sound like to me when Mike Norvell said that it moved any timelines that I had heard up at all. What I've kind of been hearing was that, again, you might get him for the second 2/3 of the season, right? You might get him after Clemson. Hopefully you're already 4-0. Hopefully you've already beaten the toughest 2 opponents on your schedule, and you're looking toward the rest of the year. But I do think Kentron brings a pretty valuable skill set to the team, and I'd love to have him back for Clemson. Not expecting him this week up in Boston when the Noles take on the Eagles, but keep an eye out. Maybe back for Clemson, more than likely, based on what a couple of people have told me, likely going to be back after that weekend. So love to hear your thoughts. Again, I think the Noles are relatively healthy at this point. If you've made it through 2 weeks of the season, you've got, don't want to take anybody lightly, but I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel, so I don't mind it as much. But you don't want to take anybody super lightly, but you've got what many would consider an easier game this weekend. You've got what a lot of people think you should go up and just absolutely beat the heck out of Boston College, who is just a shell of itself from a few years ago. Nearly lost to Holy Cross this weekend. Just not a great team at this point at all. Maybe one of the worst in the ACC. In fact, sandwiched in between on either side of that Clemson game, you've probably got 2 of the worst ACC opponents out there in Virginia Tech and Boston College. And so a good chance for the Noles to rest some guys, a good chance for the Noles to not have to rely on some starters and hopefully have some starters out around that halftime mark like they were able to do with a really strong start to the third quarter. But, you're through one of the more physical games you're going to play this year in LSU. You've made it through now a short week in Southern Miss. I think there's always a worry about health and injury coming off of a short week. Less time to let your body recover, less time to prepare. Gotten through that part of the schedule. Now if they can get through these next 2 weeks, get to that bye week, I think they're really set up well for that stretch run. As far as injury updates go, you certainly never like guys to be hurt. You never like guys to be out. But it does seem like it's probably about as good as it could be from an injury front at this point. The other note that I'll make is that Fabian Lovett seems to be in really, really good shape. I don't think he's limited at all. Again, we kind of told you that he was going to sit out a lot of fall and that he'd be back for the season, and that has certainly been the case. That's been what it's looked like, and that's been how the Noles have operated. So really good news for FSU there. Hey, we shared all of this and more in our Discord. If you're not part of that and you want to get access to inside information, or if you just want to support, you can go to patreon.com/DFNS. You can join for anywhere from $3 a month and up, depending on what you're looking for out of a subscription site. If you just want to support, hey, go sign up and support. If you're looking for access to inside information, go support. There'll be a link to our Discord there on Patreon as well. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you interacting with 2,500 rabid FSU fans every single day, all hours of the day. Mute your phone if you don't want that thing going off at night. But come join us in there. We really do have a lot of fun. Can obviously post updates and stuff in there a lot quicker than we can get on here and make another video for you guys. So good stuff there. Appreciate you if you're already a member there. Appreciate you guys for watching this video. If you missed our latest video on what Keon Coleman did that absolutely shocked me, and it wasn't the hurdle, you can click right here to check it out.